we got the power, that it's in us all the time, that it always has been, it always will be. It is the very nature of who we are, this dynamic, creative power that has brought forth everything into existence. So I started off the month by talking about how Ernest Holmes defines spiritual power. And he says that spiritual power is a dynamic quality of the invisible essence of life, intelligence, and law, which we call God or first cause. The thing that initiates everything into being. That is the power. That is that creative, dynamic force that is always bringing itself into expression in all the multitudes of ways that we see it exhibit itself, through each creature, through each plant, through each animal, through each star in the sky. Every single thing is that dynamic, creative energy of that love intelligence that's brought itself forth into expression. So Ernest Holmes, who was our founder of Science of Mind, he taught that in the Science of Mind philosophy here, he taught that through the power of our mind, we are constantly creating the conditions of our life. Well, that's the good news and the not so good news. Sometimes we wind up in conditions in our lives that we really did not want to experience. I personally believe it's all for the evolution of our soul, but this still doesn't make it happy to have it. He says we are always using this innate creative power, whether we're using it consciously or unconsciously. It's usually when we're using it unconsciously that we're creating those situations we really didn't want to experience. It's those hidden beliefs. It's those ideas that we haven't really processed through, that somehow have got locked into us, that we think are true, and that we're giving them a power that they don't really actually have. By our beliefs, by our reaction to them, by the way that we approach them and the way that we deal with them in our lives, we actually give some of that stuff power. We give away our power to them, and they wind up showing up in our lives in ways that we didn't necessarily want. All of this power begins to shape what we experience today, and it shapes what we experience tomorrow. By our hidden beliefs, by that unconscious ideas that we have, we begin to experience things in our lives. And again, we can experience wonderful things, and we can experience those things that we'd rather not through that. So, through our ability to tap into a power for good within ourselves, we can find solutions to our problems. This Wednesday night, we're talking about how to heal our pain through our mind-body connection. Pain is something that pretty much everybody's going to experience in some form or another in their life. And sometimes we can do things that actually begin to heal that within ourselves in a way that doesn't require medicine or doctor intervention or, of all those other different things that we have to do, just by the change in the way that we think about it, change in the way that we look at it and experience it in our lives. This is not about some external force that we're trying to apply in that situation to manipulate the effects that we're having. This is about tapping into our own inner knowing. There's an infinite wellspring of knowledge. There's an infinite power within each one of us that we can tap into and use it to change the things that we're experiencing. This energy, this wellspring of powerful energy inside of us can be a healing force in our lives. Not just healing our physical pains and so forth, but healing the conditions that we really don't want to be experiencing in there. Each one of us has that inherent power in us. You might call it a divine spark, a little thing in there that's going to ignite something and make it happen in our lives. And it connects us all to that one universal power. The spiritual power that Ernest talked about, that divine, creative, loving intelligence that is bringing forth everything into existence. Inside of each one of us, there's that little tiny spark of it that is just waiting to be ignited and brought into our experience as we move through things. It is not limited by any external circumstances. It doesn't really matter what's happening outside of us. We think sometimes that the things outside of us have more control over us than what's happening within us. But it really doesn't. There is nothing outside of us that's going to affect what happens inside of us unless we let it. And the more we let it, then that's what brings about those experiences. This force resides deep in our consciousness sometimes, and we have to go within to find it. We have to use our spiritual practices to go inside and find the things that will remind us of the truth, remind us of what it is we believe and how it is that we know this creative intelligence is moving through us. Sometimes these ideas have been so layered upon by external circumstances that it really takes a bit of excavation to get to it. We often use that analogy of peeling the onion. You've got to peel out all those outer layers before you can get to that good meaty part of an onion, if you happen to be like me, who likes onions. Ernest says this: "We are chemists in the laboratory of the infinite. What then shall we create?" We are chemists in the laboratory of the infinite. Isn't that an amazing idea? We are in this infinite wellspring of possibility. And we have everything within us to create what it is we want to experience. Now, this is not about thinking about those things we don't want to experience and thinking, now what did I do to create that? That's not what we're talking about here. I know that has been around for a long time, that you start to experience something difficult in your life, and someone will say to you, well, what did you do to create that? Which is totally filled with judgment and condemnation and all of that stuff, and also in the back of that is a, well, thank God it's you, not me kind of an attitude. So just so we're clear about that. This is not what we're talking about here, but we can change our experiences by changing how we think about them. We can experience things in a much easier way, even if it's a difficult thing, if we change how we look at it, change how we experience it. Ernest said that we can use this power at the center of our being to improve our own life and the world around us. We are chemists in the infinite laboratory of life. What are we creating for our lives? What are we creating for our experience? Our thoughts are not passive. Our thoughts are very active. They are very active, and they create our situations in our lives, or they create our reaction to external situations. You've all been in some kind of a situation that you didn't want to experience. And I know that if you thought about it and amplified that fear of it, or the dread of it, or the pain of it, then that experience became worse in what you were having at that time. I also know that if you could find a way to put it out of us, to look at it from a distance, to change the perspective of how we look at it, then the experience is received inside of us differently. It's the same experience. I had an experience of cancer 10 years ago, and I was really good with going through the process. I had done enough spiritual work that I wasn't in fear, and I didn't have a lot of worry. I knew what was in front of me to do. I was guided and directed to do it. And I was very quiet about it. I didn't talk about it with a lot of people. And I remember after about 3 months of it, I ran into someone that I hadn't seen for a while, and they said, "Oh my goodness, where have you been? I haven't seen you." And I said, "Well, I was dealing with a cancer experience." And they looked at me and they said, "Oh, what did you do to create that?" And I actually had to laugh out loud. I actually laughed in the person's face. And, it was like, okay, this is why I kept my mouth closed. This is why I didn't spread it around, because I didn't want that energy coming at me. I needed to deal with it in the way that I needed to deal with it, to move through it in a way of grace and ease. And that's exactly what I did. So as we are hitting these different experiences in our lives, as we encounter people who have ideas like that, because of their limited beliefs, this is what they're creating, probably have experienced something like that and thought to themselves, what did I do to create that? So therefore they transfer it on to someone else. But when we begin to really look at our stuff, and what are those hidden beliefs that we have that we're giving power to? There are a lot of issues that I've worked through in my life, and there's some of them that I'm still working through, But one of them that I've really healed quite well is the issue about money. And I used to think about money, well, it was certainly something I had to struggle about. There was always some kind of a struggle involved in it. I was highly educated, I made good money, but there was always this struggle. And it wasn't until I began to look at my old patterns of belief, many of which came to me from my family of origin. Many of them were around that. Many of them had to do with things that I had internalized myself about money, but I had to clear that stuff away because I was actually giving power to it. I was actually allowing it a place to operate in my life, and therefore the experience I had reflected my beliefs. And so when I changed how I thought about things and realized, wait a second, that job is not my source of everything. That job's just one aspect of it. So the money that I'm receiving from that is just one part of my financial well-being. And when I began to look at things that way and think, okay, there are lots of options out there, and there are lots of ways that I can enter into that flow of giving and receiving and allow that money to move back and forth out of my experience just as easily as it comes in, it can go out, and when it goes out, it can come back in. And when I began to get into that flow of my attitude about money, then things opened up. And it really isn't a problem for me anymore because I've been able to change what I believe about it. Ernest says this, I do believe that I am in silent partnership with all the power, all the presence, and all the love there is. I place my life entirely and completely under the protection and the guidance of this power, and I rest in complete assurance that everything I do will prosper. How would your life be if you knew that everything you did was going to prosper? In whatever way prosper means for you. If it's health, your health is getting better. If it's your relationships, you having more wonderful relationships with more and more people. Whatever that thing is, everything that you do will prosper when you place your emphasis and your attention on a power that is within you and not without of you. If you put your attention on those things that are outside of us, then we give away our power. If I think that my relationships are dependent upon those people and not dependent upon my attitude about them, then I'm going to have a different experience altogether in every single one of my relationships. If I understand that I am the one who controls how I respond in every single situation, then every single situation is more to my liking than not. Ernest says that we have a silent partnership, and that silent partnership is in our meditations, our affirmations, and our prayer work. It is the place where we do this communing with that inner power. It is that place where we have the realization of that power moving through our lives. It is that place where we get those aha moments. It's like something that you know you will never not be able to know, if that makes any sense. When I know something so deeply inside my soul that I could never unknow it, then that to me is spiritual power. That is a truth that I can rely on for any situation. And whenever I'm faced with anything on the exterior world here, anything that's outside of myself, when I'm faced with that, I can apply that knowing that I received through my spiritual practice to that situation and watch the situation dissolve. Watch the effects of it become minimized, become less intense in my experience. That doesn't mean that I don't have those experiences come up every once in a while, but my reaction to them is wholly different. My reaction to them is now at a place of ease. Like, okay, I'd rather not be doing this, but this is what's in front of me to do right now. How am I going to respond to it? Every single moment I have that choice. But when we align our belief system with those ideas of love and harmony and abundance, we tap into a reservoir of creative power that knows no bounds. When we align ourselves with those spiritual truths, and we do that through meditation, affirmations, and prayer, when we align ourselves with those spiritual truths, there is no limit to what can be done. There is no limit to the amount of creativity that's available to us, the amount of abundance that's available to us, the amount of love that we can bring into our lives. When we keep ourselves aligned with those truths and not so focused on the things that we don't want to experience, we become co-creators with the universe. We are creating the experience that we want to have. We shape our reality in accordance to our highest ideas. Listen to that again. We shape our reality in accordance to our highest ideas. The first thing we need to do is get clear about what our high ideas are. What is it I really want to bring into my life? We have wonderful processes for that. If you haven't done some of our workshops, those are great ways to bring things in. I was just talking with Kelly Marshall about creating some workshops this morning that are, I'm just like, again, full of it about these ideas. And so it's things that we can do to actually begin to bring about a better experience than what we might have previously had. However, if we allow our fear, our doubt, and our negativity to dominate us, to dominate our thinking, to be that track that we're hearing over and over again, we are giving away our power. We are creating discord, we're creating limitation, we're creating experiences that we don't really want to have. There's one other component to this that's so powerful here, and that is what we can get when we unify with others. What we can get when we come into a spiritual community like this, and we practice these things together. I spoke earlier about the labyrinth walk on Tuesday night. We did a spring equinox labyrinth walk. And for a while I was in the back, and I was watching the labyrinth breathe. I was watching the people as they were walking the labyrinth and moving into the center of it. And it would get a little tight there. And then the next thing you know, it was exhaling, and the people were moving out. And I began to realize what a synchronistic dance this was, of people, like-minded people coming together. For we were talking about new beginnings. We were talking about bringing balance into our life. That's what the spring equinox represents. And how when we come together, and in an intensified way, this beauty was created, this breathing of the labyrinth. It was a magnificent thing to see. And those of you that were here walking it with us, I'm sure you felt the power of that energy coming through. So, we have so many wonderful spiritual practices, spiritual ideas here that we can do to bring about a different experience in our lives, to change how we think about things. But when we do them together, it is amplified. This idea of unity, spirit is one in a whole. It is this one entity that is in and as everything. And so this unity of spirit is inherent within it, because we are all part of it. We're all part of that one. We came from it, we'll return back to it. We are part of that one unity of life. This is one of our most profound thoughts that we have in our philosophy, is that we are connected to everything. There is an interconnectedness of all life. All life. And whatever we do to one thing in life affects everything else around it. We do not exist in isolation. I think it's the idea of existing in isolation that has caused many of the problems that we experience in the world. This is mine, that's theirs. I don't want anything to mix between the two. Think of all the boundaries that we have created in the world that have caused conflict. I can think of several that are going on in other parts of the world right now over boundaries, over imaginary lines drawn in the sand, and the conflict and the turmoil that is happening because of that. Imagine if we could bring it together with that understanding that it's one, and it doesn't matter what you call the one. We are not isolated beings, but we are integral parts of a tapestry. There's an idea in Hinduism called Indra's net. And Indra's net is a representation of the cosmos, the entire universe, the entire world. And each one of us is at an intersection where the knots of the rope come together. And each one of us is a jewel that is placed at that intersection of those two lines. And if my jewel moves here, it moves the rope that touches this one, that touches this one, that touches this one. I cannot do anything in isolation because I'm attached to this energetic flow of all life. And if I think I can do something in isolation, then I am removing myself from that flow. I'm removing myself from the power of the unity that is available there. You know, we talk about in Science of Mind, we talk about the macrocosm versus the microcosm. The macrocosm is the whole universe. Spirit exists in the macrocosm. Each one of us is a microcosm of that one. But just think of your body for a moment. I spoke earlier of a cancer experience I had. Illness and disease happens in our body when one cell begins to take more power than the cells around it. When one cell begins to distort itself in some way that is harmful to all those that are around it. If we are a tiny cell in the macrocosm of the universe, and we are doing anything harmful, it is going to affect those cells around us, all of the individuals around us, even if what we're doing is just harmful to ourselves. I'm sure almost everyone here knows somebody that has been somehow self-destructive. And think about how that impacted your life. We do not exist in isolation. We are part of a unity, a wholeness. Each one of us plays a vital role in this entire cosmos. There is this power out there that we can use. This power that is greater than we are. And we can use it to change the conditions in our lives. And we can allow it to use us for a greater experience of everyone else, including ourselves. Now, as we talked about at the building dedication, the first service of the year, that Ernest Holmes said early on in his life, there's a power for good in the universe, and I can use it. And then later on, he said, there is a power for good in the universe, and it uses me. He had begun to understand that concept of the power of unity. And that when we surrender to thinking, I've got to control this in some way, that our life becomes a place of healing for not only ourselves, but for everyone else around us. I was reading The Anatomy of Healing Prayer by Ernest Holmes recently, and I came across this, and I thought it was appropriate to put into this talk here to bring us to a close here. He says, not that you are using a good power to overthrow an evil power. That's confusion. Not that you are using a big thing to swallow up a little thing. That's confusion. Not that you are using heaven to cool off hell. I love that. That's confusion. Not that you are using light to overcome darkness. There is no darkness. This is where we get stuck. There just isn't any darkness. How many of you have given your power away to a darkness? A darkness that doesn't exist. It feels like it when we're faced in those situations. But if we can step back and look at it from a higher perspective, look at it from that unified consciousness, look at it from a place of empowerment instead of disempowerment, then we have a different experience altogether. Our source of power comes from our embodied understanding of our oneness. I'll say that again. Our source of power comes from our embodied understanding of our oneness. And we get that embodied understanding of our oneness through meditation, affirmations, and prayer. That's how we understand our oneness. Because it's in those activities that we have the experience of God. It's in those activities where Spirit speaks so beautifully to us. And trust me, once you've had those experiences, you can never unknow the power of that presence. So how do we embrace this power? How do we harness it for our greater good, for the greater good of all? We begin by shifting our consciousness. And again, we begin by letting go of our limiting beliefs. And if you don't know what your limiting beliefs are, there's some work there to do. Journaling is a fabulous practice to figure out what it is I'm really believing here. I love a process called dialogue journaling. And I talk to the problem. It may sound silly, but you write out what the problem is saying to you and you write your response to it. And all of a sudden it's like, well, look at that. That's what I was believing there in that situation. Find your limiting beliefs and then let them go. The next thing we have to do is embrace that limitless potential that's inside of us. Find an experience that works for you, that lets you feel connected to it. In whatever way you understand Spirit to be. I like to think of Spirit as the ocean. That works for me. And so if I'm really super stuck, I head to California. And I get about 30 minutes from the ocean and I can start to smell it. And I can start to feel it. And my body starts to tingle. I think I saw Fran back there. She knows how my body tingles when I get close to the ocean. She's been on the car with me many times for that. I start buzzing because I'm close to Spirit. For me, that's the understanding of it. That I am just a single drop in the ocean that is God. And sometimes I'm in that ocean and I'm merged with it, and you can't tell where my drop starts and where the next drop starts. There's no ending or beginning. It is totally fluid. Find an understanding of Spirit for yourself. Find what works for you. There are so many different religions because there's so many different ways to connect with Spirit. There's so many different ways to practice it. If you've never experienced our labyrinth, I invite you to come to our next labyrinth walk, which will be first Wednesday in April. Find an experience that takes you on an inward journey to connect with Spirit. The other thing that we have to do is we have to take responsibility for our own thoughts. We have to take responsibility for our own thoughts. You know, I've heard over the years, people say something will come out of their mouth that they didn't really want to say, and they'll go, cancel, cancel, cancel. That doesn't really work for me, but I can understand that they're taking responsibility for what they just thought. And they're like, oh no, I'm not going there with that one. I'm going to cancel that one. That's not going to be my experience. Put some belief in it. Take responsibility for what's coming through your mind. Work on different practices to help you harness it. Meditation's a great one for that. And the last thing that was really powerful here is for us to cultivate a sense of gratitude and awe at the wonder of life. If you just think about conception, whole bunch of eggs, whole bunch of sperm, all of a sudden came together, and it made you. It could have made thousands of different combinations of people, but it made you. That in and of itself is miraculous. And then after 9 months of forming in your mother's womb, you came into existence as this perfect being. That's miraculous. You are a miracle of life. Life pulses through your veins. Life lights up your neurons. Life is breathing through you and connecting with everyone around you. we begin to approach each moment with wonder and awe, counting our blessings and being grateful for them, our experience of life changes. It can't help but. So look at your beliefs. Look at what's happening in you. Embrace the idea that you are a frickin' miracle. And give thanks for it. Let's take this into prayer. I invite our practitioners to stand and surround us. Take in a nice breath. For me, that breath connects me with all life, with that one power, that one presence that is showing up in me. And it allows me to know that it shows up just the same in everyone else. I am a miracle of life. Just as each one of us is. That miracle of creation. That miracle of awe and wonder. It's the very nature of who we are. We are brought forth into existence for spirit to experience the world around us. We are a place of love, of creativity, of purpose. I know that I am guided by the same intelligence and inspired by the same imagination, which scatters moonbeams across the sky and waves across the ocean. I know that same creative, loving intelligence that holds the forces of the universe together resides right at the heart of my being, right in the heart of all creation. That this one power, this one presence, this one creative love intelligence is so all-encompassing, so overwhelmingly powerful, that it can do nothing else but create itself in more and more beautiful ways. I know that each one of us is a miracle of creation. And I know that each one of us has the power to create the experiences we have as we move through this life. I am so grateful to feel this power bubbling up inside of me. I'm so grateful to watch it moving through all around me. I giggle in delight at the amazing presence of this one. And knowing all of this, I simply know that all is unfolding perfectly, beautifully, and easily. And so I release this word into that law, into that creative, cosmic love intelligence that knows exactly what to do. I let it go and I let it be. And together we say, and so it is.